In product management, there's two questions that I get beyond anything else. Let me take that back. Three questions. So the first question I get is from people who don't currently work in product management. And that question is, hey, how do I go and become a product manager? Now, I don't know the answer to that. Like, to be honest, it's a different path for everyone. But I have kicked off some research, talking to people who managed to get into product management within their company, outside their company, and understanding their journeys. So if you are one of those people who, let's say, in the last year or two, got into product management, ideally in a different company than where you were before, or in the same company, just please send me a message. I'll send you a quick 1 minute thing to fill out, and we'll get on the phone to talk. I'm normally talking with these people for 30 minutes if they got their first product management job in the last year or maybe even 2 years. And I am in return coaching them for 30 minutes on a topic of their choice. Anything to do with product management or to do with, I don't know, high performance, anything like that, I'll coach you. So that's my give and take. And once I have this research, maybe I'll be able to answer some of those questions better on how do you charter a path towards product management. The second question I get is from people who are product managers or maybe not, which is how do I get into Google as a product manager or any of the FANG companies, the Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. It is Netflix. Is that the FANG? I guess that is a FANG. Yeah. So that's one. Amazingly, Microsoft is not on that list. I thought it would be, but anyway. The third question I get, the third most popular question is, "Hey Shobit, how do I prioritize features?" Right, and that's what this conversation is about, which is how do you prioritize features? And what I want to challenge you here is I don't want to give you like frameworks because there's plenty of frameworks for prioritizing features. There's the RISE framework, you just Google that, or if you Google this guy named Bruce McCarthy, he writes a lot about roadmaps and prioritization. So you can learn all that stuff. But I want to challenge you and say that there's 4 different levels of feature prioritization for product managers. And as you climb up these levels, you become more and more effective. You need to spend less time on this stuff, but at the same time, your impact, your level of effectiveness, all those things go up dramatically. And you start doing more strategic things, your career moves faster. So really take some time here to reflect on where you are, acknowledge where you are, and then start making some effort to keep moving forward. If you like some of the ideas and want to talk to me about it, you can always go to shobitchuk.com/apply, where you can set up time with me to talk through how your job's doing, what are ways you could improve it, and if there's things I could do to help solve through one of my courses or a new program that I'm kicking off, I'll let you know. Otherwise, I'm happy to also guide you to other places which might be useful for you. So let's get going. Level number one, the basic level, is when you prioritize things essentially ticket by ticket, issue by issue. So very often when PMs are highly technical and they work with engineering teams very closely, they start breaking down the user story into all the engineering tasks. And then they work with the engineer to prioritize all those tasks, sequence them, and they have this perfect backlog which has all the stories and like all the engineering tasks completely well laid out, sequenced, prioritized, and estimated and ready to go, right? And if you're doing that in a way um, that your team agrees with, you're doing a good job. You started on the journey of prioritization. Awesome. Kudos to you. Keep going, but there's more you can do. And you might do that, especially during the first few months to years of your product management career where you are just starting out, where you're just starting to build that level of trust with this team. You're trying to really prove out your value. These things are really helpful. But I'm here to tell you that there's another level for you. In fact, there's three other levels for you. So, what's the next thing, right? Um, Actually, let me just add a couple more things about this level as well. One is that a lot of this prioritization happen in meeting, in sprint planning sessions, and so it's often prioritization by committee. And that's the skill set, the facilitation skill set. You're building that. And by the way, that facilitation skill set is so important for product managers, as will become apparent later. But ultimately, I'll set a goal right now, which is that you are trying to make the most of your team's collective intelligence and not your intelligence. Right? There's a simple motto that all of us should live by, which is your team is smarter than you. It doesn't mean that any of those individual people are smarter than you, but it does mean that the collective intelligence of your team is so much higher than your intelligence. And if you keep that as North Pole, things really start to make a difference. So that's a fundamental principle you should keep in mind as you think about product management. Okay, so we were at level one, issue by issue or ticket by ticket prioritization. The second level is now you are start prioritizing features or epics, right? So you are responsible for the customer story. You're responsible for understanding what are the various cases and how does the customer get impacted. You are also bringing the knowledge of the customer, their context, the job that they're trying to do, all of that to the team. And you're saying, hey, this is what we need to do. These are the things that are most important. These are, must-haves, should-haves, could-haves. And you're letting the team drive the actual breakdown into the engineering tasks and letting them sequence it. And so you're still prioritizing what gets delivered as customer value, but not what gets done every week. Now, especially for early stage product managers, this is a hard battle or a hard thing to let go because they are worried about, hey, am I adding enough value or um, am I just not am I like not adding enough value, right? What am I doing if the team's going to take up all these things? But somebody just posted very rightly, like stay in the problem space and let the team work out the solution. That's exactly right. I don't know what Moscow is. Somebody posted Moscow. Maybe that's a prioritization method. I never really gave that much weightage to all these different prioritization schemes. For me, there's a post I wrote on the cost of delay. I think that's one of the biggest things you can use to prioritize. So I never really bothered about all these different prioritization methods so much, just so you know. But anyway, coming back, yep, stay in the problem space, know the problem really well, and prioritize that, and then let the team drive the actual technical tasks that need to be done to achieve that particular feature. Yeah, it's must have, should have, and could have. In fact, that's how I prioritize my day-to-day work as well. Frankly speaking, like I literally use the most low-tech method for my personal prioritization, which is a notebook, a bullet journal, and that's what I use. But I have everything written down as these are my P zeros, must have. Oh, Moscow is must have, should have, could have, would have. I don't know what would have is. Yeah, but that's how I do my daily task planning as well. P zeros, P ones, and P twos. Must, should, could. Now, sorry, coming back to the prioritization piece. Okay, now you're prioritizing features. The third level of prioritization for you is to prioritize outcomes. Right. So this is where you're saying that let's say you manage an e-commerce product. Okay, I'm going to use it as an example because it's easily accessible, everybody gets it. And let's say your main outcome is to increase the sales, let's say the rate of people visiting your site for the first time to becoming a customer, that increases from 7% to 9%, right? And there's another competing metric you might have, which is that you want to minimize the time that the customer spends on the site. And now what you're doing is you're working with stakeholders to get that final answer on which is the most important outcome, which is the second most important outcome, which is the third most important outcome. When you're prioritizing at the epic or like the issue by issue level, sometimes people tend to ignore these higher level decisions. But now you're helping drive those higher level decisions, and now coming back to the team and saying, this is the outcome we need. Let's put our heads together on what are ways in which we can improve this thing, right? And now the team is not just participating in figuring out how things should be implemented, but they are now starting to look at it from a user's perspective and coming up with ideas on, oh, maybe we could do this, and maybe we could do that. And listen, as you become more and more senior in your career and have a broader scope to manage, that becomes a critical skill of being able to drive this collective intelligence from your entire team. I mean, this is why I lay so much emphasis on running good meetings when I do teaching. It's because that's how you drive that collective intelligence. And the other thing that happens is that they get ownership. I think some of the most powerful words in leadership are people support what they create. People support what they create, which means if your team came up with those ideas, how much influencing you have to do to get them excited about those ideas, it's very limited. Like, they came up with the idea and they're going to take ownership of it and drive it forward. So that's the next level of prioritization, which is you're prioritizing outcomes and then using the collective intelligence, so collaboration with your group, and helping and having them design, not necessarily design, but like make major strides forward in what are the features or capabilities that you would build. And now the other thing is that now that you've prioritized these outcomes, the team starts to worry about the outcomes much more than they worry about the features, right? And so very often you will, as you start to do this, you'll hear back from them on, oh, I had another idea, or they'll be much more frank on, hey, I think you suck at your job. I'm kidding, but they'll be like, hey, I don't think this is going to move the needle that much, but I spoke to this user. Literally, I've seen engineers go like, oh, I spoke to this user and they have these problems, and they'll come up with more ideas. But notice what's the other thing that's happening here. As you're working at this higher level, you actually need to let go of those low level decisions, prioritizations, and you have to let the team handle it. And so two things start to happen when those things become true. Number one, the team starts to feel ownership about making their own decisions, and they just feel like they can move things here. There's a sense of momentum that builds up. But the other thing that happens here is that you are no longer the bottleneck for every single question, every single decision. The team can drive so many of these. And you know what? Like, I love my job. I also love teaching, but I also just love living my life. And I don't want to be on the hook for every single decision because I want to go and chill out also. So, so I think it does wonders for your life balance. In such, it helps you work on much more strategic things over time. So that's the third level of prioritization. So we covered three right now. One is you're prioritizing issue by issue, story by story, just like do all these things. Second is you're prioritizing user features. Third is you're prioritizing outcomes. Actually, the second one was features or user problems. Third is outcomes. which are often tied to user problems that you could solve. The fourth thing is actually super interesting. The fourth thing is you are essentially driving the narrative and the principles to so you're still prioritizing outcomes, but you are driving the overall outcomes, the narratives, and the principles by which you make decisions, and you're teaching your team how to think. Let me repeat that again. You're teaching your team how to think. So, what this often looks like in practice, this is an additional layer on top of outcome prioritization, is that you're now starting to see the kinds of answers that the team comes up with, or engineers come up with, and you're now starting to shape their thinking. You might use words and sentences such as, let's think about it this way. Or maybe you're asking them things such as, how would you think about this? And you're much more worried at this point about how they think and how they come up with decisions versus exactly what they work on day to day, because you're setting them up for success over the long term. So that's like level 4 of prioritization. Now, the interesting thing here is, when I do this, I realize my two worlds are coming together. One is the world of I work as a product manager or as a product leader, and the other world is I work as a coach and a teacher. And in some sense, those start to come together. We are literally teaching and coaching your team on, how should you think about this problem, and you're trying to essentially course correct relatively quickly, but at the same time set them up for that long-term success, so that the next time a similar question comes up, they're like, oh no, I know how to think about this. And then like literally all you have to do is, oh yeah, I agree with you, go for it. And that's empowering for the team. It's also empowering for you, because not only have you built an awesome product, but you've imparted skills in your team as well. And it brings some of those joys of managing and coaching people, which a lot of product managers don't get typically. So I'll repeat again the 4 levels of prioritization, how I want to challenge you to think about it, and see if there's any questions. So first one was literally you're prioritizing either stories or tasks. Second one is you're prioritizing outcomes. You're prioritizing epics or like user stories. Third is you're prioritizing outcomes and let your team drive the user stories. And number 4 is you're prioritizing outcomes still, but you are now teaching your team how you should think about making those decisions. And that frees you up and builds a much more cohesive and performant team.